Mindsetters, my name is Megan and welcome grade 12 to today's Business Studies show. Today we have a revision lesson, especially prepared for you. We'll be selecting highlights from the lessons shown early in the term to help you revise for your end of term tests. You can download the notes for today's show on learnextra.co.za/live.
So this is a question I found from the 2010 final exam, November exam, and what they did was that section looked at what is CSR, what is corporate social responsibility, investments. There was a case study, if I'm not mistaken. Do yourself a favor, work through those previous papers. They'll help you with the language of the paper, and they'll also help you to figure out what do I do with the mark breakdown, because a lot of the time you look at this question and you go, oh my gosh, I don't know how much I need to write. So let's actually just get into it and have a look. So like I said, this is from the November 2010 final, and the question was, corporate social investment, so CSI, has benefits or advantages as well as challenges for corporate business. So this question is literally asking, it's a nice clear question. The question is, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of corporate social investment for business? Now this section, after we've answered, I might touch on it slightly, but this section also looks at what are the advantages and disadvantages of CSI for the community. Like I said, but I'll get back to that one if there's some time. So the first part of this question said, name 2 benefits of corporate social investment for business. Make the screen bigger, let's get into this. So benefits, just another nice way of saying, what are the advantages of corporate social investment? Now if you think about it logically, off the top of your head, if I had to say what are the benefits, I'm sure you can come up with quite a few. And the nice thing with this section is if you think about it, you can actually logically work through it. So the first benefit of CSI for business is that actually, honestly, simply, it's good public relations. If a company goes out there, they help, they often will be recognized purely based on the fact that they go out there, they help people speak about it. Did you see what that business just did for the community? And it's also a nice word of mouth thing. So the very first advantage of CSI would be it has, it simply just improves the image.
Creates positivity.
It does. It gives hope. You know, and I think that hope, there's no price on hope. And that's a very nice thing that business can do. Another benefit for business, and this is a little bit colder, I would suppose, would be it's got tax benefits. So when a company does invest in social responsibility, they either get tax deductions or tax rebates. Deduction, they pay less tax. And a rebate would be after they've paid tax, they might receive some money back. And you can imagine in the business world, every bit you save or bit you get back, you can reinvest and really do something amazing with it. So the second advantage I've got here would be tax advantages. So second advantage would be tax reductions or tax rebates. Now, before I do actually, I'm going to do the third one anyway, and then I'm going to quickly tell you why you need to be careful. The third one, you can also think of corporate social investment is going to assist, obviously, in all the socioeconomic issues. Off the top of your head, quickly think, how many socioeconomic issues are there? There's crime, there's poverty, lack of education, actually, and all those things. So what happens would be that business help alleviate socioeconomic issues like poverty, for example, or you can write lack of education, things like that. So let's quickly write that one down. So what they're doing, it creates or it assists with solving socio-economic issues, and I'm just going to throw in here like poverty. Now, as I went through that, you were probably sitting and going, oh, I know that. And again, do you see how this is logic, but you can't skip studying? Logic will never trump your studying. So try and keep both in hand. Well, they go hand in hand. I want to quickly go back to the question. So I want to show you, I didn't put it in here, but this question looked like this. 4 marks, 4 marks, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in business, you know, 4 marks should be 2 times 2. 2 points, 2 marks per point. So when you're planning, you want to make sure that you write at least 2 points. If there's a little bit of time left, you can always go back, add it in. But to be safe, write your 2 points first because you need to save your time for your essays. Let's go to the disadvantages now. Remember, that was the second part of the question. The question was, name 2 challenges or disadvantages of corporate social investment for business. Now, just as it was quite easy to think of advantages, you can also think of disadvantages. So, Sharon was recently retrenched from a South African clothing factory. So, actually, follow me, grab your pen, I'm just going to underline as I go. So, Sharon was recently retrenched from a clothing factory where she had been employed as a fashion designer for 10 years. Now, she wants to start her own small business and open up a boutique in Durban Central Business District, or the CBD. She also plans to export her designs overseas, and then she asks a friend for advice because she is worried that many businesses have relocated from the CBD, and there seems to be high rates of unemployment and crime. Now, her friend advised her to open her shop in Umhlanga, rather, and which is an affluent mixed residential and business area, only about 20 minutes away from Durban. Now, Umhlanga also offers good opportunities for growth, and the crime rate there is lower than in the CBD. However, the rental on her shop will now be much higher. Sharon and her new business are affected by different macro environment factors. Her retrenchment was a direct result of economic and global factors. Now, the high rate of unemployment, so let's go there, unemployment, and I've lost myself. So the high rate of unemployment and high interest rates are economic factors. Now, the depopulation of the CBD are socio-economic factors, and the high crime rate is a factor, so high crime rate is a factor of the social environment. Now, if Sharon is successful and exports her clothes to another country, the international or global factor of the macro environment will also influence her business. Good grief. There's a lot of information there, guys. They touch macro, market, micro. So you need to make sure that when you read those factors, that you know automatically, okay, this is a macro environment issue, this is a market environment issue. So we've read through it, you've highlighted. Let's tackle some of those questions. The very first question is, I promise to find it very soon. So the very first question there, what do you think are the possible reasons that Sharon was retrenched from the clothing factory? Now, can you see the link between global, economic, and social factors? So 3 big things happening here, guys, and I want to break it down for you. So what is the question asking you? What do you think are the possible reasons she got retrenched? So this is the first part of the question, guys, and really the possible reason, if you read through it, it could just simply be, guys, that the factory isn't making enough profit and they need to let go. Remember the strategies we just looked at? One of them was retrenchment. So they were following a strategy, okay, to try and save their business. So the first one you can write down there, the factory simply was no longer profitable. So the factory was no longer profitable. A second reason could be competition internationally and locally. So the factory she was working in had to A, compete against other South African brands, other South African clothing companies, and on an even bigger scale, they have to compete internationally. Now, when the next section, we're going to be looking at labor laws, things like that. But the Far East has very different labor laws, and it's a lot cheaper to make things. So for South African companies to compete against imports becomes very difficult. So second reason you can throw in there would be international and local competition. I'm just going to write competition. And before I hand over to Indiana, I want you to think of this one. What social and economic factors face Sharon if she sets up a shop in Durban CBD and if she sets up in Umhlanga? Remember, CBD, we've got crime, we've got unemployment, things like that. Umhlanga, less crime, but higher prices. So you think about that. Remember, we read that big case study with lots of information you highlighted. We did the first question where we looked at reasons why she could have been retrenched. I want to go to the next part now. And just to jot your memory, and also remember, I told you to think about this while we were gone. The question was, what social and economic factors face Sharon if she sets up a shop in the Durban CBD and if she sets up in Umhlanga? Now, I want a little bit more space to do this with you. So, what would she face in the CBD compared to setting it up in Umhlanga? So, they tell us in the case study that there are issues. They give you the answer here, actually, guys. So, again, read carefully. It's going to make all the difference here. So, let's quickly list those challenges. So, the first challenge in the CBD would be it's going to have higher crime. And remember, guys, these things are all associated with socioeconomic issues. So CBDs, towns, things like that will have higher crime purely based on the fact that people are desperate. They're trying to make money, things like that. So that's the first issue. They've got higher crime in the CBD. The second issue will be that there's higher unemployment. So higher unemployment. Now, before I go into Umhlanga, I want you to think about this. Look, even our CBD in Joburg, guys, we've got a lot of people coming up from rural areas, things like that, to Joburg to try and make a living, to try and make a little bit more. So we've got high unemployment, which will link to crimes and other socioeconomic issues. So with this section, keep socioeconomic issues in mind. And just to throw it in there, this is where corporate social investment comes in, because they can actually help these people. So do you see how it all links up, guys? So those were the challenges in the CBD. Let's look at why or what it would benefit if she goes into Umhlanga. So if she goes into Umhlanga, there would be a pool of people or a pool of affluent customers. Let me throw an E in there. Okay, I've completely misspelled that. So, to make my life and your life go much quicker, a pool of richer people. And I'm going to abbreviate that. Please don't do that. And second one, the business itself is in a safer area. Now, look at the CBD. We've got unemployed people, we've got higher crime rates, and that's going to affect that part of it. You've got in Umhlanga, you've got richer people, I'm saying that in brackets, and also the businesses in the safe area, so you don't have to spend as much on security and things like that. But keep in mind, Umhlanga is also 20 minutes away from the CBD. So there's going to be time delays, transport delays, not much, but keep it in mind. I want to go back to that question just to make sure that we've looked at everything. So the question said, what are the socioeconomic factors? So we've looked at that. And if she sets up in CBD and in Umhlanga. So you guys should have a pretty good idea there. Now remember, these answers I'm giving you are suggestions. You can obviously think a bit further and just add in. Okay, but making sure, obviously, it's in line with the answer. Let's do C. Let's see what they're asking us. So C, what are the possible economic changes she faces in exporting her clothing, and how can she overcome them? So what are the challenges here, guys? So think about this logically. South Africa, local is lekker. We've got our own culture. As South Africans, we're actually very rich in what we do. So clothing, food, things like that, a lot of it is very South African. Now, if you take what we like, what we do overseas, for example, they've got a whole different culture. So the first challenge she will face is just simply looking at different cultures, their tastes, their attitudes, their behaviors. Imagine taking biltong overseas. We think it's yummy, they're going to be like, oh no. Now imagine trying to get that into a market.
Who doesn't like biltong? Seriously. If you don't like biltong, please post it on the page, but I'm convinced there's none of you guys out there.
So, exactly, but that's very South African. Let's go somewhere else, and they'll be like, no. Okay.
Dried meat?
No.
Gross. Gross.
Another challenge she'll face would just be export costs. So she's got her clothing, and now she needs to export it. So remember, last year you looked at it, some tariffs, extra taxes, things like that. So she needs to keep in mind how much it's going to cost her to go over there, taxation-wise. And, well, let's quickly jot this down before I get too far ahead of myself. So, C, what are the possible economic challenges? So, I'm going to try and squeeze it in here. It could be expensive. Let me find my pen. Could be expensive. A second reason could be something as simple as a different target market. And this will include tastes. So another, well, easy way to remember this, think of the biltong issue. And the second part to this question, how can she overcome this issue? What issues? The issues of it being expensive, the issues of looking at different markets. Let's quickly do this here. So the second part, guys, of question C, it will actually just be easier for her to export, still staying with exporting, but to export to countries that surround South Africa. So surrounding South Africa. Now I want you at home to think about all the countries that surround us. Can you think of some, Indiana?
Uganda. How surrounding us
Surrounding,
where?
like touching our border.
Oh, like touching our
Touching.
border. Oh gosh, is Swaziland touching our? Is Lesotho touching our border? I suppose they're inside, right?
Okay, well, let's go with that. It's still touching, right? So they can export to something
Mozambique.
local. Mozambique.
Mozambique.
There we go. It's a nice one. So what she can do is she can export to Mozambique. It's less traveling. Well, it's less cost because she has to transport it. Well, she has to transport it either way, but it'll be cheaper because it's not going to be expensive airlines or freighting, shipping, all those things. So she can simply make her life easier by not going local, but just a little bit over
Just
the
a little
border.
bit further. Just
Yeah.
a little bit further over the border.
And think
Just over
about
the
this
border.
logically. All those countries like Lesotho and all those, we live close to each other, so we might have similar tastes. So that will also solve that issue. And I'm going to try and squeeze the last one in really quickly for you guys.
You can do it. You can
I
do it. I believe in you.
I believe in me too. Thank you. So how could technological factors influence the success of her business? Now, this is a nice, easy one. I'm not going to write this down for you because I know you're going to remember to write it down yourself. So how can technology help her business? E-commerce, for example, if she goes online, she's available 24/7, 365. So she no longer has to have business hours. She can put up a website, people can order, she can send, makes lots of money that way. It's also easier for consumers to get hold of her.
Let's go to a short break now. Remember, if you are struggling and you need help, remember to post your comments and questions on our Facebook page, facebook.com/LearnExtra, or on Twitter @LearnExtra. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. Let's get into some more revision. Over to you.
So let's have a look at that question. The question was, oh, I just skipped a whole bunch of that. Just remember, before we get there, there's the Skills Development Act. With the Skills Development Act, there's also the Skills Levy that goes with it. And not just that, it's the National Skills Development Strategy. So there's more legislation, which not going to look at it all. So the question that I took for you today was from the February-March 2012 final exam. It was question 8 in section C. Well, that's where we find our essays in anyway. So let's have a look here. The question reads, the Labour Relations Act 95, Act 66 of 95, and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act were put into place to ensure a better South Africa for all the people in the country. So inclusivity is also a little point there. What do they want from you? Yeah, and I actually want to change my pen color so you can pay attention better. So you want to discuss the nature and the purpose of each act and explain how this is implemented. Also evaluate the impact of these acts on both employers and employees. Now this seems like a short enough, easy enough question. If you don't keep your eyes open, do all those things, you're going to miss out and not do everything you actually need to do with this. So I want you to have a look here. So you need to discuss the nature You need to discuss the purpose. You also have to explain how this is implemented and look at the evaluation. So what I've done today, I've cheated a little bit. I've got the essay in front of me just so that I can show you what to do here. So now you know with your essays, guys, you've got your introduction, you've got your body, you've got your conclusion. Again, I'm going to show you the slight changes they've made. It's really nothing too exciting, so don't stress about it. Now remember, with your introduction, and I always want to tell people, always get so stressed out about an introduction of an essay. Nothing to worry about. Think of the definitions. So for example, we're looking at legislation today. They've given us the 2 laws. And the nice thing is you can give a definition on both of them. And the fact that we're looking at legislation, a third point could simply be talking about legislation in South Africa. You could go as far as to say, look at it historically, a lot of things. So don't ever stress out about an introduction. There's so much to say. Just be confident and write it down. So let's look at their introduction quickly. So what they said with their introduction, so the Labour Relations Act regulates the fundamental rights of employers and employees. And it contributes to economic development and social justice, and it standardizes labor practices in business organizations. And you'll see here any other relevant introduction related to the Labor Relations Act. Now, you'll see what they've done here. They've only focused on the Labor Relations Act. They could have gone into detail on the Basic Conditions of Employment Act as well. So instead of 3 points, you could have written a lot more. But what you don't use there, obviously, you're going to use in your body and just, get the real marks going there. But again, please don't stress about introduction. It's 3 marks. You can figure it out. You're clever enough for that. Now, let's look at the body. Remember, I showed you there's 3 parts to this essay that they want, and specifically those 2 acts. Now, remember, you could get an essay where they don't specifically tell you this is the Labour Relations Act and this is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, for example. They could get keywords or phrases related to that. So you need to know your act so well that if you read a sentence, you know which act it goes with. So let's have a look what they did, yeah. So the first part to this, they looked at the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Remember, we circled the nature, so they went with the nature. So what is this? Establishing or enforcing basic conditions in the workplace. It's to promote economic and social development. And again, anything else that's relevant. Hopefully I can squeeze in and quickly help you figure out how many points to write in your body. Again, you guys stress out about it. And there's nothing to stress about, honestly. So actually, I'm just going to go through this essay really. I'm not going to go into the details of it. I just want to show you the main points and quickly give you like a trick that you can use to figure out how much to write. So they've got the nature of basic conditions. They have the purpose, which we underlined, and how it is implemented. Now, before you go any further, so this is point number 3, and point number 4 was evaluation from the employer's perspective. Now this evaluation, guys, evaluation is literally open-ended for you. If you can evaluate it, it could be a positive evaluation or a negative evaluation. Either way, just remember you can't just say no, it's negative and leave it there. You need to explain why. So if I mark your essay, I want to be convinced why this is negative or why this is positive. So take the time and write down the detail. On the next slide, so as I said, here's the positive impact and obviously the negative impact. Now, same thing again, guys. We just looked at basic conditions of employment. Here's another subheading, Labour Relations Act. We look at the nature, we explain it. We go into the purpose, we explain it. Do you see how it actually becomes quite easy? The implementation, and again, lastly, the evaluation. And again, positive or negative, whichever way you feel, as long as you can make a point and make me understand, okay, why it's positive, why it's negative. Now, every single one of you there will have a different way of trying to tackle an essay. Now, this essay, for example, if we just go back to the question itself, so let's go back to the question, and I'll show you a little sum you can do to make your life easier. So we broke this down, and I didn't label this properly, so that is actually number 4. make the page a bit bigger. So now we know we've got two laws happening here. We've got the Labour Relations Act and we've got the basic conditions. Now within these two, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 subheadings. Remember, nature, purpose, implementation, and where was it? Evaluation over there. So we've got 4 on this side. In other words, there'll be another 4 on this side. And you need basically, remember, to get your 27 marks, you will need plus minus 14 points in your essay. What I want you to try and practice from now already is not just your 14 points, have your 14 points, but use examples. Read the newspaper, throw it in there. You will literally get more marks for using good examples.
Let's go to a short break now. Remember, if you are struggling and you need help, remember to post your comments and questions on our Facebook page, facebook.com/LearnExtra, or on Twitter @LearnExtra. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. Let's get into some more revision. Over to you.
So get your Macmillan textbooks. I've taken activity out of there. Follow along with me and let's have a look at this. So on page 42, and it's activity 2, you can do this with me. So the case study tells us the following. Now, Davis Colliery is a coal mine near Newcastle in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a rural area with a large coal deposit. Now, the company has been in business for 50 years, it's quite a while, and much of the equipment needs to be replaced. So a lot of the equipment needs to be replaced. They have also caused environmental damage by creating dust in the air, which has left many of the people with respiratory problems. Respiratory problems, their lungs, things like that. Now, the workers live in the area and are highly experienced, but many in the surrounding community are infected with HIV/AIDS. Do you see how in this little case study there's so much happening? Next part, last month, trade union representatives gave the workers a talk, informing them of their rights in the New South Africa. Recently, a new mine with the latest machinery and technology opened nearby. Now, the price of coal has dropped internationally and at the same time, and their transport company that takes the coal from Richards Bay to export has also increased their prices substantially. Now, we know that the business can only control their internal environment. Remember, internal environment, they can only control the micro. And thus, management will have to take immediate action to address the workers' grievances and possibly grant pay increases and improve their living conditions, especially as we see in the market environment that there is new competition that offers workers better pay, living conditions. Now, the new colliery, or competition, that's a fancy word for competition, also has much better equipment and machinery. Now, Davis Colliery has little to no control over the broader external environment, which is the macro environment, and, remember, market. So, they have little control, but what do they do to meet these challenges? So, in this case study, we have looked at from macro to market. There's so much happening there. If you're not in the habit of underlining or highlighting, you might just miss something as we go along, especially in tests, guys. Also, if you see a case study, take that pen, underline it. It's a good habit. First question. So the first question we'll is asking us, in which environment would we find suppliers such as the transport company? So where would we find suppliers? Now, you should have this should jump straight to your mind. So where are you going to find this? You will get this in the market environment. So in the market environment, because it's suppliers. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, what possible suggestions do you have to deal with the fact that the transport company has increased their prices? So because the transport company has increased their prices, what can you do? Now, there are two parts to this, and yet you need to look at both sides. So if the price of fuel or petrol has gone up, they have no control over that. If prices go up, the company all they can simply do is try and adjust to it. They can adjust to it in ways like they can cut costs, so have fewer employees, or try and use cheaper raw materials. So they will literally have to look inside to try and adjust to an increase in the petrol price. If there hasn't been an increase in the petrol price, it's a whole different story. They can, for example, hire more employees, get trucks, do the transport themselves. But I quickly want to write this down so you can also have this. So for the first part, if there is a petrol increase, I'm just going to I'm going to write an arrow at petrol increase, what will happen? They will have to adapt. Remember, how are they going to adapt? They will have to look at cutting costs through getting different raw materials, stuff like that. And you also need to look at it, remember, if petrol just stays the same. So it's not an increase in the fuel price. So if this happens, what they'll have to do, they could change their supplier. So get another company to deliver the fuel, change supplier. They can hire their own staff with their own transport. So there's a lot that this company can do. A challenge. So the challenge is the suppliers aren't delivering. What can they do to fix it? So they can, there's different opportunities, yeah? And this question could have been asked in a different way as well. So it might not necessarily have been fuel price. There could have been a shortage in the raw materials. And how, I want you to think about that. How would a company deal with a shortage in raw materials specifically? So next question, B. What should responsible companies do about the social problem of HIV? So what should responsible, keyword, companies do about the social problem of HIV/AIDS? And this is quite a simple one, and I think we touched on it a little bit in legislation. Every company needs to have an HIV/AIDS policy, which is written in such a way that everybody can understand it. That policy also needs to be in any official language of that person's choice. So it needs to be easily understandable. So what should companies do? They should have their HIV policies and make sure that all workers, it gets distributed, not just distributed, people actually need to understand what's written in there. And in that policy, what also states how a company will deal with people who are infected, how a company could help them, for example. So for B, simply you can add in there, you can say that the company needs to have an HIV/AIDS policy in place. Then, let's go to question C. How can the colliery, remember that's just a fancy word for competition, use the latest advances in technology or global forces and take the opportunity to turn the weakness and threat of the old, outdated machinery into a strength? So I'm going to quickly take another pen because we need to look at specifics here. So what is the question asking us? It's asking us, what can the colliery use to, so what can they use, how can they use the latest advances in technology and take the opportunity, turn it into a threat? I mean, no, you don't want to do that. Take the opportunity and weakness, take the opportunity and go further. Take the weakness, change that into a strength. Take the threat, take that threat and change it into opportunity as well. So I want to break this down. So the first thing that they need to do, so how can the colliery use latest advances in technology? So the first thing they can do is get rid of their outdated machines. So outdated machines. Lots needs to happen with that. So outdated machines. So first part here, it's hazardous. So the case study tells us that it's dangerous, so it's hazardous. So what needs to happen here is, because it's hazardous, guys, it becomes a safety issue. So the workers are no longer safe at work because the machinery isn't up to date. So according to labor law, which we did last week, part of it would be making sure that your workers are safe. Basic conditions of employment, remember? Now, these workers are not safe, so the machinery has to be updated to make sure workers are safe. So let's get this down. So it's hazardous. So it's not only a legal thing, but it's a moral issue. So it's a moral and legal issue. And with this, they have to make sure, because of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, that your workers are safe. Because remember, a safe worker is a hard worker, and that's really what you want out of your workers at the end of the day. The next part of this, how would they fix the hazardous? So the quarry is 50 years old, machinery is broken, they're causing pollution, people are getting sick, there's a lot of things happening there. So simply put, the company has to get finance somehow to fix that equipment. So let's get that down. So second part of this question, so they need to arrange for finance. And with this, they need to upgrade their machinery. So upgrade the machinery. And this obviously, guys, would lead to an increase in productivity. So logically, productivity. So logically, guys, there will be an increase in, if you get better equipment, better machinery, the machines are just going to work better, so you'll literally be able to produce more. But your workers will also now be happier, and because they are happier, they'll be more effective and they'll work harder. So productivity will go up almost, you can't imagine, because of the machines and the people being happy. And I just want to check, let me add the last point to this question, and then we'll go to the next part. So not only will it increase productivity, it will also retain workers. So retain workers. So workers, instead of leaving to go work, because remember the case study, it tells us that there's a new quarry that opened up, they've got fancy machinery, people are getting paid better. Obviously, people would want to go from the old quarry to the new one, okay, because they get better benefits. So by simply improving their machinery, they'll increase productivity and they'll keep their workers. And remember, you want to keep your workers because they come with a set of skills and knowledge that is vital, really. Now, let's go to question, I think, 4 or D. So question D, what should they do about their environmental problems? Remember, because they're causing pollution. And then explain the relationship between physical forces and socioeconomic forces. So the first part of this question is asking us, what should you do about the environmental issues? Now, by law, the company needs to improve the health of the workers, which they've obviously hurt through not having the proper equipment. So the first thing they need to do is try and help their workers. The next thing they need to obviously do would be to fix that problem. So put in better new filters that will maybe not take away all the pollution, for example, but will bring it down. In other words, again, creating this idea of sustainability where people are looked after constantly, and also remember the company will have a bad name if it is polluting. So the company needs to move away from this bad image to improve and to have more sales, really. So the first part of this question, so they have to, by law, pay for rehabilitation. So pay for rehabilitation of their sick workers. So let's add in there, sick workers. Next, they also need to install proper filters. So install proper filters. And the next part of this question, they asked us, how do the two come together? And this is quite a tricky one. I want to write it down for you first so that you've got it, and then I'm going to explain it to you. So the second part of this question asked us, what is the relationship between the physical forces and socioeconomic forces? So this, simply put, would look like this, guys. The physical force, so the physical force, which in this case is the pollution, is part of the macro environment. So there we go, that's the macro environment. And simply put, this will then follow on as this now becomes a socio socioeconomic problem. So remember, socioeconomic problems are part of the macro environment because people don't have enough money. If people don't have enough money, they can't invest, not even just invest, they can't buy from you. And it becomes social, it's a social issue which needs to be addressed by business. Remember, we looked at that with CSI. And I think there's one more question on the section. And
We
have
can
a
do
look.
it. We
I
can do it. 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh,
4 minutes
plenty
left,
of
guys.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Please.
what forces in the macro environment are concerned with price fluctuations of natural resources? So again, a lot of these questions are two-parted, guys. So always make sure that you see what they're looking, or how many questions there really are. And the second part is, what can the colliery do to minimize the impact, okay, of the price fluctuation? So quickly try and think back to the macro environment. And actually, you can also use PESTEL quickly if you go through it in your mind: political, economic, social, etc., etc. Quickly go through that in your mind, and you will see that issues of natural resources or price fluctuations of natural resources would be part of the economic section, guys. Prices going up and down would definitely be an economic issue within the macro environment. So for the first part of the question, we're going to have, so what forces in the macro environment are concerned with this? The first part would be the economic environment. So economic environment. And what can the colliery do to minimize the impact? So what can they do, guys, to minimize? Let me write it down for you. So the first thing they can do would be to stockpile. So stockpile, in other words, wait for a better price. So they're concerned with natural resources, the prices going up and down. So when you stockpile, you literally buy a lot of something and keep it in a warehouse, keep it safe, so that you might have bought it at a certain price, but you're not sure whether these... So let's use an example. So an example could be you are manufacturing furniture, and the price of wood is going up and down, and obviously you know that's going to affect your costs, which will affect your profits. So if you stockpile, you will buy a lot of wood at one stage, keep it aside, and in this way maybe try and dodge the bullet in the sense that if prices go up, you have that in stock that you can use, and maybe wait for the prices to go down again, and hopefully by then you can get back into buying raw materials on an ongoing basis without worrying. Another thing you can do would be to increase your productivity. So increased productivity. So with increased productivity, it really does come down to making up for a shortfall. So because you're losing money, you need to find other ways. So increasing your productivity will definitely help. And the last one, you can, so we've looked at an increase. Third one, you can decrease expenses. So how do you decrease expenses? For example, you can decrease expenses by trying to find a substitute, for example, for your product, the raw material you need to use. You can also try and find a cheaper supplier. There are lots of different ways to try and decrease it. So that case study, they honestly could have asked so many other questions on it. And again, that's what I'm saying. Highlight those important parts. You know what to look for. And be confident when you do it as well.
Well, guys, we've come to the end of today's show. Thanks for joining me. Remember to visit our website, learnextra.co.za/live, to get the notes and to watch the videos. And if you are stuck and you have any questions, send an email to helpdesk@learnextra.co.za and we will help you. Also, guys, we are dedicating the month of March to Library Month. Join us as we discuss some great books and some exciting competitions on the way. Goodbye.